Welcome back to another episode of Accelerate Leadership. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. I think I have some things that will be extremely beneficial to you. Today I want to talk to you about the common obstacles that leaders face. Let me ask you a question. You faced any obstacles lately? Coming out of a season with this pandemic and everything else, I think that all of us can look back on the last year, the last 18 months and say there has definitely been obstacles. But maybe it's been a good time for you. Has there been an obstacle in the last 5 years? I can just tell you this, that whether you're facing obstacles in your life right now or not, there's probably obstacles in your future, because obstacles oftentimes are put in our path as a way for God to test us, to develop us. And so that's what I want to talk about today. If you're a leader and you're trudging forward and doing great things, whether it be in business, in ministry, wherever it might be, you're going to face obstacles. So how do we deal with that? Like, what are some of the obstacles? How do we deal with these obstacles? I think these can be some helpful tools for you today. And so I'll start by saying this. We see Joseph in the Bible who faced incredible obstacles. It's always fun to look at the outcome in his life. We see Joseph was a ruler. He was second in command. He had servants at his fingertips. He had all the wealth of Egypt at his fingertips. He lived in a palace. All of these things. And we look at all of that and go, wow, only to be like Joseph. But the thing that we don't understand is what he went through to get there. There was a lot of trials, a lot of obstacles that strengthened his character and that made him the man that he was when he became the ruler that God put him in position to. So let's look at this. Joseph was, first of all, found himself in a pit. Joseph found himself purchased as a slave, really. He found himself in the home of Potiphar, and then falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. So he was thrown in prison. Out of prison, he was forgotten and later was brought to interpret a dream for Pharaoh. Then we see he enters the palace and eventually he moves himself into a position of power. God really moved him into a position of power. But what a lineup of obstacles before he ever got there. It is just crazy. Trouble or obstacles can actually be a sign that we are being led by the Spirit of God and that we're being effective as a threat against the enemy's kingdom. That's something that I always keep in mind. Matter of fact, I just texted a friend today. He texted me a picture and he said, man, every time we're in a 3-day season of prayer and fasting right now. And he said this, he said, every time I fast, it seems like there's some kind of obstacle or wrench thrown into my day. And he sent a picture of something that was broken. And I said, man, it usually means we're doing something right. We're pursuing the right mountains when we're facing major obstacles. So here's an obstacle. Here's a thought about obstacles. An obstacle can position you for a quantum leap. You ever think about that? Did you ever think that an obstacle would position you for advancement, for promotion, for a quantum leap? You ever thought that way? Sometimes it's the obstacles that we solve, the problems that we solve are the things that promote us into the positions that we've been desiring. So thinking about that, if handled correctly, it can be a benefit. If we handle stress and trials correctly, they'll propel us to new locations. So I just challenge you today, if you're facing some kind of an obstacle, maybe it's just been a season of obstacles for you, can I just tell you, buckle your seatbelt, because I think God is getting ready to launch you to a new level in your leadership and maybe in the place where you work, because obstacles can position you for a quantum leap. Now, here's a couple things to consider. Number one, problems always come before enlargement. We kind of talked about that, before promotion or whatever. When the church was enlarged here, we added on to the facility in 2006 here. 2005 they started and ended in 2006. and they tripled the size of our facilities here. And here's what happened, though, in the midst of that. They came in with heavy equipment, and they dug up the yard, put big holes. They ripped out the parking lot. The roof came off the building, and at one point it started to rain, and there was just rain leaking in all over. I remember doing a tour of the facility, and there was just water leaking in this building everywhere because the roof was taken off of it. You know, sometimes we have to go through obstacles. We have to change things up. We have to encounter some major problems before we can encounter some major improvements. And so oftentimes we're going to encounter some pretty major problems before we ever encounter any kind of enlargement. But the outcome of this, we had a building that was 3 times its size. And the principle for this building rings true in our own lives. There's times that we find ourselves ripping stuff up or dealing with hurts of the past and problems and trials and obstacles that we may not want to face, but we have to if we want to experience that enlargement. Second thing to consider about this quantum leap that we can experience with obstacles is God hates pride. And so sometimes obstacles are a way for God to deal with us in our prideful state. You know, there's nothing more humbling than having to ask for help. There's nothing more humbling than being in a situation where what we planned or what we did failed. And so those obstacles and those trials in our life can actually bring a humility that then God can see He can promote us because we have been humble instead of arrogant and prideful. Third thing is this: obstacles separate the hirelings from God's chosen leaders. Obstacles separate us. The average stay of a pastor in a church is not very long. And it seems to be changing, and trends are changing, and statistics are always changing. But did you know that the average pastor leaves a church over 5 disgruntled families? 5 people that dislike them? You know, in a church of 500, to have only 5 that are disgruntled, that don't like you, that become your thorn in your flesh, it's easy to focus on the 5 that are the problems, that are the obstacles, and completely forget about the 495 that are for you. See, we need to rally those that are around us, that are for us, to encourage us so that we can get through these trials. We need to understand obstacles separate the hirelings from God's chosen leaders. If you're chosen to be in a place, you stay there, you plant yourself there, and you don't allow obstacles, whether it's from people or obstacles from finances or obstacles from building projects, to stop you from doing what God has called you to do, because you are a leader. Now, here's the median tenure for pastors. In 1996, it was 3.6 years. 3.6 years. Guys, we've got to be people who are willing to stick by our callings and remain in place. Those statistics have changed a little bit. In 2016, we've seen that there was actually a bump and an increase in the tenure of our pastors, and it was more like 6 years. So there was an increase in the tenure of pastors and leaders. And it takes people with the mentality that I'm called and I've been chosen by God to remain here in order to see that. Treating ministry like a job instead of a calling it's an ingredients for failure. James chapter 1, verse 2-3 says this, such an important passage. My dear brothers and sisters, when you face troubles of any kind, consider an opportunity for great joy. What? Great joy in obstacles? Absolutely. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing. We need to be a people that endure through obstacles. Here's another one. Obstacles can be faith builders. We can take obstacles and utilize them as a season of faith, because oftentimes obstacles push us to our knees in prayer, don't they? It's oftentimes when we're facing crazy times that we pray the most. Through a relational breakup, a divorce, financial problems, whatever it might be, we end up pursuing God like we've never pursued God before. And it gives us an opportunity to increase our faith because we see God move. And so if you're facing a trial, if you're facing an obstacle, man, let it push you to your knees in your prayer closet and seek the God of the universe, because He wants to see you through it, and He wants to see you better as a result of it. I heard a story, and maybe you've heard it. It's a powerful story about a donkey. Farmer's donkey fell in a well pit. It's a big well pit. The farmer kept looking at the situation, wondering, how am I going to get this donkey out of here? The longer the donkey was in there, the less hope the farmer had that he could ever get him out. He hadn't come up with any kind of resolution. So he finally thought to himself, well, the donkey was old anyway. I'm just going to bury him. So he got a shovel and he started to get some dirt and fill that well pit up with dirt. And that donkey, he just whinnied and cried out even more, thinking, why are you doing this to me? You're killing me. Why are you burying me alive? And so that donkey, in the midst of all of that, realized, I can turn this obstacle and I can turn this situation around for good. He started to shake off the dirt that was being thrown upon him in life. The more he shook it off, the more he stomped it down, the higher he got, until the well pit was filled and the donkey was outside of the pit, free to roam once again, just like he was created to be. Now, can I just tell you that life is going to throw some dirt on you? There's going to be people, situations, callings, jobs, facilities, all these different things are going to throw some dirt on you in life. The trick to getting out of the pit and overcoming the obstacle is to continue to shake the dirt off and to continue to endure and not give up. You cannot give up. Now, I want to talk about some self-imposed obstacles for a minute, because sometimes obstacles are out of our realm of changing them. Sometimes maybe it's God putting obstacles in our path. Sometimes maybe it's other people putting obstacles in our path. But there's one other obstacle that sometimes hits us and we may not even see it. And we need to look a little bit inward today to see if this describes any of the obstacles that we're facing. And that is self-imposed obstacles. You facing any self-imposed obstacles? You know, I'm a landlord and I have rental property and stuff like that. And the thing that I find in interviewing people and meeting with people to rent homes is oftentimes they've made a lot of bad decisions and they've created obstacles for themselves based on the fact that they've just violated some very clear principles from God's Word. Okay? You take a single mom that continues to have sex with men, and before long, she's got 3 or 4 kids by different men. And now she's finding herself in a dire situation where these men have walked out on her. God's plan is marriage, right? We want to keep sex within the confines of marriage. The marriage bed is undefiled, and we want to have kids in a happy family environment. And sometimes our decisions create obstacles for us. And maybe you're in that situation. Maybe you find yourself as a single mom, and you find yourself in some self-imposed obstacles. The first key is, number one, get back to God's Word and start applying His Word and obeying what God has put in place. He's put some barriers around us, some ideas and some morals around us to protect us, not to make life not fun. And sometimes by violating those commands, by violating those direct principles that God has placed in His Word, we create obstacles for ourselves. If we marry a non-Christian, if we go through this whole dating relationship and we're madly in love with somebody, but they're not a Christian, we're violating a principle in the Bible that says don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers. But if you follow through with it and you continue down that road, oftentimes people find themselves 20 years into marriage and they're unhappy, and sometimes it's even worse. Sometimes there's unfaithfulness and other things going on, self-imposed obstacles. Sometimes we do that. Proverbs 19:3 says this: people ruin their lives by their own foolishness, and then they get angry at God for it. You need to write that one down. Proverbs 19:3. People ruin their lives by their own foolishness, and then they blame God. So here's some self-imposed obstacles that you might be facing. Number one, fear of other people. Fearing other people and prioritizing people's opinions over our own knowledge of what we should be doing Maybe that's scriptural or biblical things that we know we should be doing, but because of fear of what other people think around us, we continue down a path that's destructive. Maybe so that we can fit in or whatever. Dale Carnegie said this, instead of worrying about what people say of you, why not spend your time trying to accomplish something that they will admire? See, sometimes we just need to shake off the dirt of what people think of us and what people are saying about us, quit fearing how they're going to respond, and be our own person and do what God has called us to do and create whatever that is that God's calling us to create. And it will often cause people to then admire where you've gone. Proverbs 29:25 says, the fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord will be safe. Psalms 37:10, soon the wicked will disappear. Though you look for them, they will be gone. You know, the people that we fear the most often are probably they probably don't last very long. They're kind of like a flash in the pan. They're in our life for a while, and then they're gone. You know, I think one of the greatest examples of this is our high school years. I think oftentimes we put all of our attention and all of our efforts and all of our energy into trying to fit in, being popular, and looking like the crowd. And God's called us to look different. And all those friends that you're trying to impress, whether it be at school or in your neighborhood or wherever, they're probably not going to be around long. Man, because when trials come, those are the types of friends that run out immediately. Here's another one, fear of problems. Fear of problems. This is a self-imposed issue in and of itself. Oftentimes the things that you fear are the things that will come upon you. We can't allow the problems that we're facing to cause fear in us because fear paralyzes us and doesn't allow us to address the problems that we're facing. Psalms 118:6, the Lord is for me, so I will have no fear. The Lord is for me. In the midst of this problem, I'm not going to fear. I know the Lord is for me, so I'm going to step out in faith. Fear tries to stop you from accomplishing your mission. It paralyzes you. Maybe you have heard the acrostic of what fear is, false evidence appearing real. The enemy tries to make you afraid of things that sometimes aren't even there or not even a reality. Third thing is this, self-imposed obstacles, fear of failure. What would you accomplish if you didn't fear failing? Like if you knew that you were going to succeed at it, what would you attempt? See, that's probably the thing that you need to be doing and investing your energies and your focus into. See, we shouldn't fear failure. Now, are we going to fail? Absolutely, we're going to fail. Winston Churchill said this, true greatness is a man's ability to go from failure to failure without any significant loss of enthusiasm. True greatness is a man's ability to go from failure to failure without any significant loss of enthusiasm. We need to allow failure to encourage us and to show us not how to do it, right? When you fail at something, you know, okay, well, I know that I can't do it that way because that didn't work. So it gives you more options and alternatives. Here's some great quotes by John Maxwell. A difficult time can be more readily endured if we retain the conviction that our existence holds a purpose, a cause to pursue, a person to love, a goal to achieve. Here's another one. You don't overcome challenges by making them smaller, but by making yourself bigger. You know what they say? When the leader gets better, everybody gets better. We need to get better through our obstacles. The greatest mistake we make is living in constant fear that we will make one. Did you catch that? One of the greatest mistakes that we make oftentimes is living in constant fear that we'll make a mistake, because that's when you most often will make one. The last one is this. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change, but the leader adjusts the sails. Fourth self-imposed obstacle is fear of imperfection. Fear of imperfection. Can I just give you a reality check? You are imperfect, and so am I. That's why Jesus died on a cross for us. We're imperfect. Ecclesiastes 11:4 says this, if you wait for perfect conditions, you'll never get anything done. You'll never be perfect, and the conditions will never be perfect for which you've been called to step into. We're not going to have the perfect situations. There's always going to be something. If we're critically looking at every single detail, we're probably going to find that we never get started on anything because it's never a perfect situation. Looking at great leaders of the Bible, I think it's pretty obvious that we're in good company with a lot of imperfect people. Our past is covered by the blood of Jesus, and we need to walk in that forgiveness and know that we are perfect in the eyes of God the Father through Jesus Christ, His Son. Now, here's some other obstacles that I want to encourage you to watch out for. We got a lot of things to cover, so I'm going to move quickly. Fear of lack. We often don't do things because we fear lack. Can I tell you that the provision comes when you initiate the vision? When you step into it, that's when the provision often comes. I've always said this too, when I've had times where things were tight financially. Sow a seed when in need. What is a seed? A financial gift. If I'm in need and I'm experiencing lack, I'm going to sow into ministry-related things and believe God for a return. If I'm in need of more time, I'm going to sow time into other people and get my focus off of myself. Here's another thing that can be detrimental and a great obstacle is our carnality and our sin in our life. We need to identify those areas that are hang-ups in our life, sins in our life, addictions in our life that are slowing us down and causing obstacles in our path. It could be alcoholism, drug addiction, it could be sex addiction, it could be pornography, it could be a number of things that try to hold us captive. We need to get through that carnality. Here's another one, misunderstandings and wrong information can be a source of obstacles in our life. Sometimes we need to pursue the truth and dig a little deeper and not just make assumptions. Last week we talked about listening as an important trait of communication. Well, misunderstandings and wrong information will often derail us in our leadership, and we need to make sure that we have the right information. Complaining. This can be a huge thing. Don't listen to complaints and don't be a complainer. Now, there are legitimate things that we can look at that need to be corrected and fixed, but we need to present them in a way that's not with a complaining spirit, like constantly complaining and whining about what is, instead of dreaming and thinking about what could be. Rumors. Taking rumors and running with them and believing them. Here's the last one. Criticisms and persecutions. Those who contribute the least, I say this all the time, those who contribute the least often complain the most. Those that want to criticize and that want to persecute people are often the ones that are the quickest to complain, and yet they contribute the least. So don't allow criticisms and persecutions to be obstacles in your life. Now here's some poor ways of handling these obstacles that we've talked about. Here's 5 poor methods to use. Withdrawing, trying to isolate yourself. Can I just tell you, isolating yourself only singles you out so the enemy can overtake you. Think about the gazelles in Africa and the lion after them. They always look for the weak one that's isolated themselves. It's kind of off and alone by itself. Don't withdraw when you're facing obstacles. Don't substitute your goals. This is a big one. What does that mean? Okay, so I took Bowen, my son, he's my third, took him deer hunting. While we were sitting in the deer stand, man, we didn't see a deer all night long, but there was a squirrel that kept coming around and chattering and making noise, and he was running all over the place. And at one point during the hunt, Bowen looked at me and he said, "Kill him." Well, see, that would be substituting the goal, because the gunshot may scare off the very thing that we're pursuing to hunt, the deer, the bigger animal. See, oftentimes we will substitute the great vision God has given us for little things that are only distractions. Let's not substitute the goals that God's placed in our heart or in our life, because those are some of the greatest obstacles that we can have. Here's another thing. Bad way to handle obstacles. Get defensive. Being defensive. You know, Jesus, he never even answered the questions of the Pharisees oftentimes when they were attacking him. He wasn't defensive. He could have blown them away with all of his intelligence, with his knowledge of the beginning all the way to the end. being authentically 100% God, but yet being 100% human. The deity of Jesus could have overwhelmed his enemies, but he instead didn't speak oftentimes during his trial when he was challenged. Like a sheep, he went to the slaughter. He laid his life down for us. And we're called to not be defensive as well. Now, can we bring an argument, a positive argument with a good attitude, with some solutions, or challenge people when we're offended? Matthew 18 gives us a clear direction on how to deal with criticisms and how to deal with people. We go to them personally, one-on-one, and we share that they offended us or they hurt us. But don't act defensively and act out in rage. Number 4, being overbearing and hard to get along with. There's just some people out there that you just don't want to do anything with because they're constantly overbearing and they're so far one direction that it's hard to get along with them. They're always criticizing the things that you do. See, you can't intimidate your way through a problem and force your way through it. That's not the way to handle it. When things aren't going well at home and you're having marital breakdowns, that is not a time to intimidate or be overbearing and try to prove your point to fix the problem, because that is not going to be the solution. You cannot intimidate your way through obstacles. 5th and last one is this: making excuses for the obstacles. Making excuses. And I heard a man say one time, yeah, my mother-in-laws drove me to drink. No, she didn't. You chose to drink. See, we can't make excuses for all of our hang-ups and our obstacles and our issues in life. We can't make excuses for them and blame everything on everybody else around us. We need to pick ourselves up and march forward and not give excuses. Now, in closing, I want to give you just a few effective ways to handle obstacles. What's a positive way to handle them? Double check your direction. Biblical calls are initiated by God, not by man. So make sure that you're not straying away from what God's called you to do. It's kind of like substituting the goals. Double check your direction. Remain fully committed. Until you've heard from God that you are supposed to leave and move in another direction, remain committed to the direction that you're heading. Obstacle or no obstacle. Remember, steady plodding and persistence brings prosperity. Number 3, remember that steady plodding and persistence brings prosperity. This reminds me of the tortoise and the hare. The hare was much faster than the tortoise, but the tortoise won because he had steady plodding and persistence. He didn't give up and he didn't get sidetracked. Number 4, remember, starting requires the most energy. You ever seen a space shuttle take off? The amount of fuel they use on liftoff is insane. It's just a ton of fuel. But then once they get into orbit, it takes hardly any fuel to navigate the ship. That's the same way in ministry. It's the same way in our callings. Oftentimes it takes so much more energy to get this thing off the ground and get it moving than it does to maintain it. So don't give up in the midst of your startup thinking that it's never going to be accomplished, because it will be. It will be. 5, cast all your cares upon Jesus. You know, thing about prayer is this. Prayer is a transfer of our burdens on ourselves to our burdens on God's shoulders. See, when we go to God in prayer, we are transferring those burdens, and we need to leave them with Him. And after we say amen and the prayer is over, we don't take those burdens back upon ourselves. We've left them with Jesus. Cast all your cares upon Him, for He cares for you. His shoulders are so much bigger than ours. He's so much more capable of handling problems and obstacles than we are. We need to lean on Him during these times. So let's overcome. Let's overcome. Here's some ways to overcome. Refuse to give up. We talked about that. Begin to picture a better future. Dream. Have faith movies. Think about what could be instead of what currently is. And take bold action. Take bold action. If you don't move beyond where you are, then where you are is where you will always be. Did you get that? If you don't move beyond where you are, then where you are is where you will always be. Just want to challenge you today to continue to push forward, to not give up. Unless God is definitely, clearly communicating that you need to take a new direction, stay committed to where you're at, continue to push forward, overcome the obstacles, because there is a brighter future ahead beyond the obstacles, and you'll be a better person for it. God bless you, my friend.